I've been talking to a lot of software teams who have been trying out either AI tools like Claude Code or Codex or something like that for the first time, and they get frustrated when an AI agent writes their code and it doesn't really follow, say, the team's conventions or things like that. And the instinct is you either need to refine your prompts or maybe change the model or that the tools just aren't there. And I think that that's something that needs to be kind of revisited and rethought through from the perspective of what it means for a code base to be agent ready. And this has been something I've been talking to a lot of people about over the last few weeks. So the topic has been top of mind for me. And I want to talk through what that looks like. So the first thing we need to do is understand that the model's only going to do as good as it can with what it's given. So if your code base has bad conventions, not doesn't have good examples to go off of against, then it's going to have trouble with generating correct output. So it's going to follow the conventions that already exist inside of your application. So for example, if the code base is using fat controllers, then when it tries to create its own controller, it's going to try to mimic those things. And if you have no tests, then it has no way to verify its work. And so we get upset about like when say something's not working or the model says, yeah, everything's good, but actually the foundations that it's building upon just aren't really there and prepared to give it the best chance of success. So one of the first few things that is most important is going to be a test foundation. The model, to be good at its job, needs to have a way to properly verify its results. So if you don't have a strong test suite, if you don't have a strong type system, linting tools, things like that, then there's no way for it to verify its work. And so the number one thing to do is to make sure that the agent has some way to go ahead and actually verify the work that it's been doing. The next is to have some documentation as code. So what that means is, historically, I've personally not been a fan of having a lot of documentation, especially on small teams, say startups, things like that. And the reason being is that these things can get out of date pretty quickly and it's hard to maintain. And so you spend all this time writing documentation, it gets out of date fairly quickly, and now you have to reinvest time in that. Now, I think there's a mindset shift that has to happen now with LLMs because these things can now actually help us with the documentation. So using LLMs cuts the cost down of actually maintaining it. And the benefits that we get outweigh the costs as well, because having strong documentation, again, is another point for the LLM to lean on to have guidance into what it's building. So I highly recommend starting to be more diligent about documentation. And that goes from things like having a good Claude.md file, AGENTS.md file, starting to extract actual documentation in a docs folder, really structuring your content so that documentation is a tier one asset inside of your code base so that it can reference it. I've even started doing ADRs or architecture decision records inside of my code bases to help guide it. So that way when the LLM is going through your code base, it can actually see and understand why certain decisions were made, as well as log its own. Now, the other thing to think about is architecture clarity. So if your code base has, say, 5 different ways to maybe build a model, then your LLM is going to have difficulty in deciding, 1, which pattern to replicate, 2, it might even build its own version. So we have to have more standardization around the code that the model is working within for it to have the best chance of success. And then feedback loops. So feedback loops include tests like I was describing before, but also things like linters, having a CI test suite, things like that, so that the agent can verify its work and go through to understand whether or not they succeeded. And I think we've seen even more of this coming through with agents being able to test their work in a browser themselves. Last couple weeks ago, Cursor put out a blog post of how they set up their Cursor agents to record videos of the work that it's done to show back that it's actually succeeded as another piece of the feedback loop to people to review, which has been super interesting to see. So if I were starting from scratch, what would I do? I would start, number one, making sure that you have good test coverage. I think unit tests and system tests and things like that are probably the number one piece to put together and help provide you with the success you need to have agents inside your code base. That's going to be number one. Number two is having a good Claude.md, AGENTS.md file. One of the things that teams end up doing here that kind of shoots themselves in the foot is having ginormous Claude.md files. So we need to really stick to making sure that those are streamlined, they're not too big, and that they are maybe 100 lines to 200 lines max. When you do need to move out of something like that, what you want to do is start extracting other files and let the CLAUDE.md AGENTS.md file be kind of a map to where it can find any other docs that it needs and going from there. Next is making sure you have CI, linters, security checks. So for Ruby on Rails, that's Brakeman is a good example of that. So it does static analysis of your code to see if there's any security issues that need to be remedied. That's another powerful one. But having all of those things in place is really going to set you up for success to have agents inside your code. So I'm working actually on a full breakdown on this in a blog post early next week. So stay tuned for that. And I also published a free agent skill, which you can find in my Claude Code workflows. I'll link to that in the description as well. It is a assessment, code-based readiness assessment that you can run and analyzes your code base around 8 different dimensions. It will give you back a report and grading, as well as suggestions on what you can do with your code base to help improve it to be agent ready. So check that out. I'll leave that in the link in the description as well. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you can get all of these as they come out. So I will catch you in the next one. Thanks.